Imagine being told the one thing tying your family together for nearly a century had to be torn down. Not because it was falling apart. Not because it was dangerous. But because Karen said it did not fit the aesthetic of her shiny new neighborhood. What would you do? My name is Robert Miller. Though most folks call me Bobby. I am 52 years old. A retired plumber, widower, and father to a 16-year-old daughter named Emily. Life has not been easy since my wife passed. But I have done my best to raise Emily right and to keep the flame of family tradition alive. Our tradition sits at the edge of Pine Valley Lake in the Appalachian foothills of North Carolina. It is a wooden-covered bridge with a red roof. Built by my great-grandfather in the 1940s. He worked with hand-sawed beams. Nails he forged himself. And paint mixed in a bucket behind the barn. That bridge is not just lumber and shingles. It is where my grandparents took wedding photos. Where my dad carved his initials. Where I proposed to my wife on a rainy October evening. Pine Valley Lake itself is man-made. Created when the county dammed the creek back in the 1930s. My great-grandfather was part of that crew. When the work was done, he built the bridge so his children could cross the creek without wading through mud. Over the decades, it became more than a crossing. It became our family's marker in the world. Growing up, Pine Valley was quiet. Families had picnics by the water. Teenagers skipped stones. And neighbors treated each other like kin. My daughter Emily still loves riding her bike across that old red bridge. The boards rattling under her tires. Just like I did at her age. But everything changed when the new development, Pine Valley Estates, came in around the year 2019. Big city money flooded in. Glass-walled mansions popped up where pine trees once stood. And right at the top of it all was Karen Whitmore. Karen, with her pearl necklace and her designer shoes, swept in from Charlotte like she owned the valley. She took over the HOA in her first 6 months. And from that day, nothing was safe. Gardens were non-compliant. Fishing sheds were hazards. Porch swings were unapproved fixtures. And then came the letter. On a Tuesday afternoon, sealed with the HOA crest. It landed in my mailbox. 30 days to remove the non-compliant covered bridge. Failure to comply will result in fines of $500 per day. I read it once. Twice. A third time. My hands shook with rage. That bridge was where Emily scattered her mother's flowers every spring. It was the one place she could feel close to her mama. And now, Karen, a woman who had never worked a day of sweat in her life, wanted it gone. I drove straight to the HOA office, which Karen had conveniently set up in her glass-front mansion overlooking the lake. She met me at the door, smiling like a cat who already swallowed the canary. "Mr. Miller," she said, holding the notice like scripture. "The bridge simply does not align with our community's elevated vision. It is outdated, unsafe, and frankly, an eyesore." I slapped my great-grandfather's original county permits on her desk. "This bridge has stood since before you were born. It is legal. It is family. And it is not going anywhere." Her smile thinned. "You have 30 days. After that, the fines begin. Consider this your final warning." Standing in that glass palace, staring at her smug grin, I realized this wasn't about rules. This was about control. And if she wanted a war, she had just declared it. Karen wasted no time. Within 1 week of handing me that letter, she announced an urgent HOA board meeting. It was set for 7 o'clock on a Thursday evening. Inside her marble-floored living room with glass walls that looked straight over Pine Valley Lake, I showed up in my work boots, still smelling faintly of pipe glue and sawdust. With me were only two allies, old Mr. Jenkins, a Korean War vet who still fished the creek every dawn, and Mrs. Alvarez, who baked pies for the church every Sunday. Everyone else in the room were Karen's hand-picked supporters, newcomers with shiny cars, manicured lawns, and wallets deeper than the lake itself. Karen tapped her pearls against a glass of sparkling water and smiled for the phones filming her every move. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to discuss community safety. Specifically, the Miller-covered bridge. She slid a thick folder onto her glass coffee table. The cover read, Independent Safety Review. I picked it up, flipped through it. Grainy photos of shadows that looked like cracks. Bold words like liability and risk. But the fine print revealed the so-called expert Whitmore Engineering, her own cousin's outfit out of Raleigh. No license stamps. No real credentials. This is garbage, I said flatly. My voice bounced off the tall windows. That bridge has stood strong through 80 winters and storms. It will stand through 80 more. And your cousin never set foot on it. Karen's smile never wavered, but her eyes flashed. Mr. Miller, emotional appeals will not change the facts. All in favor of requiring immediate demolition. Hands shot up. One after another. 7 in total. Against. Only 3. The vote 7 for demolition. 3 against. Mr. Jenkins muttered under his breath. Railroaded. Plain and simple. Mrs. Alvarez dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Karen tapped her pearls again. Smug as a queen. You have 30 days to comply. After that, $500 per day in fines. This is final. That night, I sat with Emily on the bridge itself. The planks creaked softly under our feet. The red roof glowing in the last light of sunset. She leaned against me, her voice small. Daddy, are they really gonna tear it down? I wrapped my arm around her shoulders, kissed her hair. Not if I have anything to say about it. The next morning, I drove into town, straight to the county courthouse. The building smelled like mildew and old paper. I combed through dusty filing cabinets, drawers of maps and deeds. Hours slipped by. Sweat ran down my back. My eyes blurred from squinting at faded ink. And then, in a drawer marked 1935 to 1949, I found it. A county survey map, dated 1942, with my great-grandfather's name written bold in ink. Not only did it show the bridge sitting on land he purchased outright, it also revealed something I had never known. He had bought partial rights to the Pine Valley Dam itself when it was first constructed. I read it once, twice, 3 times. The words didn't change. My family's name wasn't just tied to the bridge. It was tied to the very structure that made Pine Valley Lake exist. That night, I drove home with my hands trembling on the steering wheel. Karen thought she could bury me in fines and humiliation. But she had no idea the ground she stood on belonged, at least in part, to me. Karen was not the kind of woman to take a quiet defeat. When she saw me pushing back, she changed tactics. Instead of one big strike, she came at me with what old Mr. Jenkins called death by 1,000 paper cuts. First came the fines. My pickup truck, parked in my own gravel driveway, was suddenly labeled commercial equipment That was $50 a day. The American flag flying from my porch, branded an unapproved structure, another 50. The wooden swing where Emily liked to sit and read, unsafe. That one was $100. Every morning, the envelopes piled up, one after another. By Karen's tally, I supposedly owed nearly $10,000 within just a few months. Then came the harassment. A black SUV sat parked near my house for hours. A man with a camera snapping pictures, like I was some kind of criminal. Neighbors whispered that anonymous letters had shown up in their mailboxes, calling me an unstable widower with anger issues. Animal control even showed up one afternoon because someone claimed my dog was a dangerous animal. My old hound Max, who barely had the energy to bark at squirrels, wagged his tail at them the whole time. Emily cried when she saw the officer's truck. "Daddy, they're trying to ruin us." I hugged her tight, forcing calm into my voice. "They can't ruin what they don't own, sweetheart." But inside, I was boiling. So I went back to the courthouse, dug deeper. I knew my great-grandfather's name meant something more than just that bridge. And I was right. Buried in a metal file box marked Water Rights. Pine County, 1930 to 1960. I found the missing piece, a deed signed in 1938, transferring ownership rights of part of the Pine Valley Dam to my great-grandfather. I stared at it, heart pounding. My grandfather hadn't just built a bridge. He had bought into the very dam that created the lake. And when he passed, those rights had rolled down through the family until they landed in my hands. Alongside the deed sat a small envelope with a tag, authorized key holder. Inside was a brass key, heavy as a pistol, with the year 1938 stamped into its handle. I held it in my palm, the metal warm from my grip, and the truth hit me like thunder. Karen could find me all she wanted. She could call me names, smear my reputation, throw every rule book at me, but she had no authority over that dam. Legally, the flow of water in Pine Valley Lake was in my hands. That night, I sat on the bridge with Emily, the key heavy in my pocket. She leaned her head on my shoulder, voice trembling. "What are we gonna do?" "Daddy." I looked out over the moonlit water, remembering my great-grandfather's calloused hands in the old black and white photos. "We're gonna do what our family's always done," I whispered. "We're gonna stand." Summer of the year 2021 rolled in thick and humid, the kind of heat that makes the air shimmer over the blacktop. For most folks, it meant barbecues, fireworks, and kids skipping rocks across the lake. But for Karen, it was her moment of glory. She planned the Pine Valley Summer Gala for months. Banners with gold lettering hung at every entrance. A local television crew rolled up, cameras polished and ready. Catering tents lined her lawn with white tablecloths. Champagne on ice. She strutted around telling anyone who would listen this would be the event that puts Pine Valley Estates on the map. But while she was rehearsing her speech, I was at the dam with the brass key in my hand. By dawn, that Saturday, I stood at the heavy iron gate. The same gate my great-grandfather had locked shut more than 80 years earlier. Deputy Harris from the county sheriff's office was there too. Hat tipped low against the sun. He looked over the inspection order I had secured through the state, nodded once, and said, "You're within your rights. Mr. Miller, do what you need to do." The key turned stiffly, gears groaning like an old beast waking from hibernation. Then came the sound, a rushing roar, deep and endless. As the spillway opened, white water foamed, spraying mist into the air. Pine Valley Lake began to fall, inch by inch, then foot by foot. By the time Karen's ribbon-cutting ceremony began at 10 o'clock, the waterline had already dropped 3 feet. She stood in front of the cameras, golden scissors in hand, smiling wide for her audience. Behind her, the once full lake looked strangely shallow, muddy banks beginning to peek through. People started to murmur, pointing at stumps rising from the water like old bones. When her speech reached its peak, a shout rippled through the crowd. The lake is draining. Panic spread. Kids cried. Boat owners cursed as their shiny pontoons tilted in the muck. The band stopped mid-song, horns squealing in the awkward silence. Karen whipped around, her smile cracking. What's happening? Who did this? That was my cue. I walked up, brass key hanging from a chain around my neck. The television cameras swung toward me like spotlights. This is a scheduled maintenance release, I said, holding up the state's inspection order, signed and authorized. This dam has belonged to my family since 1938. Karen's HOA has no jurisdiction here. Karen's face turned ghostly pale, then beet red. She stormed toward me, jabbing a manicured finger at my chest. You can't do this. You're ruining everything. You'll pay for this. Deputy Harris stepped between us, calm as stone. Ma'am, he's acting within the law. If you interfere, you'll be charged with obstruction. The cameras caught every word, every tear streaking her makeup, every wild swing of her hands as she shrieked about sabotage and revenge. By noon, the lake was down nearly 6 feet. Her sparkling dock hung useless, her fancy boats stranded in mud. Investors turned their backs on her, whispering angrily. The once proud Gala became a spectacle of chaos. That evening, the local news ran the footage, side by side on split screen. Me, calm with documents in hand, and Karen, mascara running, screaming like a child denied candy. By the next morning, everyone in the county had seen it. Her empire had cracked wide open. The weeks after the summer gala felt like the whole valley had exhaled for the first time in years. Neighbors who used to avoid eye contact now waved at me when I drove past. Folks gathered at the general store, chuckling as they replayed Karen's meltdown on their phones. Even the teenagers, who usually kept to themselves, whispered, "Did you see how red she got?" and laughed until their sides hurt. But Karen wasn't laughing. Her lawyers flooded the courthouse with filings, emergency injunctions, cease and desist orders, demands for damages. She even tried to paint me as a threat to public safety, calling the draining of the lake reckless eco-terrorism. Judge McAllister read through her stack of claims, frowned, and tossed them aside. "Mr. Miller acted under lawful authority," he said in open court. "This case is dismissed." Each loss bled her pockets dry. Contractors abandoned her half-built mansions. Investors demanded their money back. And the HOA's coffers shrank to nothing. Then the state opened its own investigation not into me, but into Karen. Misused funds, conflicts of interest, nepotism in those so-called safety reports. One by one, her allies vanished, leaving her alone. By autumn, The HOA board voted her out entirely. The new board, made up of locals instead of city imports, did something no one expected. They passed a motion to protect historic landmarks in Pine Valley. At the top of that list, the red-roofed covered bridge my great-grandfather built. One Saturday in October, we held a small ceremony. A bronze plaque was bolted to the bridge, reading, "Miller Bridge, built 1942. Preserved for future generations." Emily stood beside me, her hand wrapped in mine, eyes bright with pride. For the first time since her mother's passing, I saw her smile without sadness behind it. Life slowly stitched itself back together. Mrs. Alvarez's pies returned to Sunday gatherings. Mr. Jenkins taught Emily how to bait a hook. The air around Pine Valley felt lighter, freer, like we had all been released from a long chokehold. Karen's name became a curse, muttered only when someone tried to boss others around. Realtors warned newcomers, "Don't pull a Karen if you want to fit in." Rumor had it she sold her mansion at a huge loss and fled to Florida, tail tucked between her legs. I didn't celebrate her downfall. Truth be told, I pitied her a little. But I also knew one thing: no amount of money, pearls, or lawyers could buy what she tried to steal. Legacy isn't written in contracts or fines. It's written in sweat, in wood beams that hold strong through storms, in a community that remembers. Standing on the bridge at sunset, I traced my hand over the initials my father carved when he was 16. Emily leaned against me, whispering, "Mama would be proud." I looked out over Pine Valley Lake, steady and shimmering, and felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Karen had thought she could erase us. Instead, she ended up erased herself. By the second year after Karen's fall, Pine Valley was a different place. The lake, refreshed by the controlled release, sparkled clearer than it had in decades. Fish returned in droves. Children laughed on the banks, and neighbors gathered without fear of clipboards or fines. The bridge became more than just my family's memory. It turned into the symbol of Pine Valley itself. Couples posed for wedding photos under its red roof. Artists set up easels, capturing its reflection in the water. Every autumn, school kids painted it in watercolor for the county fair. Folks began calling it the heart of the valley. Emily grew stronger too. Losing her mama had nearly broken her. But standing on that bridge each spring with flowers in her hands gave her healing. She joined the high school choir, started smiling in ways I thought I might never see again, and even told me one night, "Daddy, I think we're going to be okay now." As for me, life slowed into something I hadn't felt in years: peace. My hands still knew the weight of a wrench and the ache of long workdays. But now, they also knew what it meant to rest. To sit on the porch with Max snoring at my boots. To watch the sun dip behind the hills. To hear Emily humming in the kitchen. Sometimes I'd walk across the dam with the brass key still tucked in my pocket. It was more than metal. It was proof that legacy survives if you fight for it. Proof that one family's grit can outlast money, power, and the sharp tongue of someone like Karen. And Karen, her name drifted into legend. A warning. A joke. A story parents told their kids: "Don't be a Karen, or you'll lose everything." Last I heard, she was bouncing between rentals down in Florida, trying to rebuild a life she couldn't control. I don't carry bitterness. What I carry is pride. Pride that my great-grandfather's bridge still stands. Pride that my daughter knows where she comes from. Pride that a community finally chose memory over money. But here's the truth. I'm not the only one with a bridge. You might have one too. Maybe it's a porch swing your grandpa built, or a kilt your grandma stitched, or even just a patch of land where your kids play ball. So let me ask you this. If someone like Karen came along and tried to rip it away, would you pay the fine and stay quiet? Or would you stand your ground, no matter the cost? Tell me in the comments. I read every story. And maybe your fight will be the next one folks need to hear.